Hello, everyone. Today we have a fabulous webinar. SunRay, in conjunction with Cotney Law Firm, has another fabulous webinar that is conducted by Danielle Maya. She has over 20 years of experience as an attorney. Her practice encompasses all areas of construction law. My name is Ariella Wagner, and I'm the founder of SunRay Construction Solutions, a national preliminary notice service that helps thousands of subcontractors and suppliers secure their lien and bond claim rights. So without further ado, I introduce the fabulous Danielle.
Ariella, thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here to share some knowledge with you on this, and just so happy to be presenting with SunRay, an excellent notice company. So this is the third part in a series that we put together that SunRay has on its website for securing payments in Texas. The first two series focused on liens, and this last one is on bonds. So we know that no one likes to work for free. We've said it before, it's worth saying again. Unfortunately, if you're working in Texas and you don't get on and something to kind of just start out the program with, one of the things that really sets Texas apart from all the other states is that if you do not have a contract with, if you're a second tier sub, or even a first tier sub, contracting with that general contractor, you're going to have to send notices out for every month that you're not getting paid. You don't wait to the end. And that's the same for liens as it is for bonds. So that is one of the big things that sets Texas apart. A lot of people think you can wait till the end. You didn't get paid and just send them a final notice and then lien the property. You can't do that. So liens are not available on public lands. So that's why bonds come into play. And Texas's bond statute is just as complicated as the lien statute. However, if you're doing work on a federal project in Texas, then you follow Miller Act, and it's a lot more simple. You can wait to the end of the project before you send your notices and do your lien. You don't have to send notices out for every month that you're not getting paid. So with that, we will jump right in. And let me see if I can there we go. So it is the three-part process like we had talked about before. The majority of this presentation is going to be on Texas state public bonded projects, but we'll also touch on privately bonded projects and a little bit on the federal projects. So payment bond, if you're not familiar with the different types of bonds, sometimes it can be confusing. A payment bond is something that your prime contractor, and your prime contractor is somebody that has signed a contract with the owner. So in this case, it would be the owner of a state-owned property. And this is something that the prime contractor does for the benefit of the subcontractors and suppliers if they don't get paid. The performance bond is something that protects the owner from the prime contractor defaulting. So some key things to really remember as you're starting out on any Texas project, whether it's bonded or it's not bonded, you want to request your information early. So as soon as you sign the contract, get your folks in a habit of asking for information on the project, because Texas doesn't have a requirement that the owner files a notice of commencement with the real property records, which is where you could get all this nice information if they start not paying you on the project. So oftentimes we find our clients scrambling on Texas projects because they're 2 months behind on payment and they don't know who they need to notify of what and how they need to do that. And so request the information early. The other key thing to remember is if you're making custom products that can't be used in any other, specialized products, then you need to send notice of that immediately upon signing your contract. That's definitely required. That's not just a good practice. You got to send it right away. And we'll talk about those deadlines. But if you get in the habit of requesting the information right when you sign the contract so that you'll know who the owner is, who all the players are, if there's a bond on the project, this is going to help you when you're not getting paid. And then the third thing you need to remember is if there's retainage being taken out of your contract, you need to send notice of that. And the best practice would be to send notice of that when you're signing your contract. You could even think about attaching these kinds of notices to your contract as exhibits. That could help you. So on the Texas public state projects, the timing for doing what you need to do on the bonds is similar to the timing on the Mechanics Lien, and we'll touch on those deadlines a little bit later. And then also on private projects with a bond, you can treat it as a lien. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but I just want to kind of give you something up front that you can kind of treat it like the lien deadlines. So when are bonds required? So on public projects, if the prime contract is less than $25,000, then there's no bond required. And if you're trying to recover for non-payment on that, it's going to be similar to the lien requirements. But really what we're focusing on here, and typically what we see is most of the state projects are over $25,000 and even over $50,000 for the entire project. That's not just your piece of it, it's the entire project. So usually we get them over $50,000, and that's where the bonds are required. So here's something that's kind of a bummer for original contractors. If you have a contract directly with that property owner on a Texas state public project, you don't have any protections under the bond scheme. There's nothing there to protect you. It's unfortunate, and you just have to sue the owner directly. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's kind of a problem, and just something to remember. If you're a prime contractor, you really can't file against the bond because there is no bond there to protect you. So we've touched on these different categories a little bit. So prime contractor means that you actually have an agreement signed with the property owner. First tier sub is once removed. So you signed your contract with the prime contractor. Second tier sub is removed one more time. So you signed your contract with the first tier subcontractor. And then the manufacturer of specially manufactured materials. Typically we see these folks sign a contract directly with the property owner or with the prime contractor, but sometimes they sign them. They sign their contracts with first tier subs. So you've got to figure out if you're manufacturing specially manufactured products or materials, you've got to watch who you signed your contract with. But regardless, as soon as you sign that contract, that's when your trigger starts to put the owner on notice that you can't use these products in any other project. So this first square, top left, is really one of the most important things to take away from the entire 3-series presentation. All subcontractors have to send notice for every single month that you're not getting paid. That's the key that sets Texas apart, and that's the same for liens and also for bonds on state projects. If it's a bond on a federal project, you don't have to do that. But bonds on the state projects, that's what you have to do. So regardless of what you're doing on the project, who did you contract with? If you contracted with the owner, then you are considered a prime contractor. Second tier subcontractors have to send 2 monthly notices. You can combine that, but you just have to meet that second month notice deadline. And then the second tier manufacturer of material supply must provide an early notice too. So we talked about the request for information a little bit earlier, but here's how you request the information on a bonded project. There's 4 different kind of scenarios here, and it just depends on who you're sending your request to. So if you're sending your request to the governmental entity, the first column is what you want to focus on there, and your request will be made pursuant to 2253.026 of the Texas Government Code. The key here is who you're requesting it from, and if you're requesting it from the project owner, there is no deadline for them to respond. And so best practice is to request it from everybody. If you know of everybody at that point, definitely request this information from whomever you signed your contract with. But as you'll see in the second column there, if you're requesting it from the prime contractor, they're supposed to supply that information from you within 10 days after they received it. Same deal with the subcontractor. If your contractor's with a sub, they've got 10 days to respond. And then if you know about the payment bond on the project and you're requesting from the surety, they're supposed to respond within 30 days. And what you're really wanting to get here is you're wanting to get the name and last name address of the governmental entity with whom the prime contractor signed their contract, the name of the surety issuing the payment bond and performance bond if there is one, a certified copy of the if you're trying to find out information about subs that are above you, then ask for that information too, and also ask if those subs have furnished a bond for your payment. So here's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. These are your deadlines, and they should look kind of similar to the deadlines that we talked about when trying to perfect your liens on private property in Texas. So if you're a first-tier subcontractor, and here's another thing that differs. So on the bonds versus the liens, when you're sending your notice for a bond, it's got to be sworn to. So that's something that's not required when you're sending your notice of non-payment for liens in Texas. You don't have to swear to it, but you have to swear to it when you're sending your notice on the bond. And one of the reasons is because it's a little more formal, and you never end up filing a lien on it that has to be sworn to. So anyway, here we go. First tier subcontractors. You've got to mail your notice to both the prime contractor and the surety on or before the 15th day of the third month after each month that labor was unpaid. You actually performed the labor at the site or material was delivered. So I'm going to give you a scenario where we can kind of work through all these dates on a fact pattern. So we're going to assume that you got a contract signed with you're going to be a second-tier sub. So you've got a contract signed with a subcontractor to make specially manufactured material, and you got your contract signed on October 2018. And then you're going to start working in November 2018. And so we're going to use those two dates, and one more date for you to remember. Everything works fine in November. You start working. December works fine too, but in January they didn't pay you at all. And so what do you do? So we're going to walk through these deadlines and see what you do. So if you're a first-tier sub, you need to send your notice of non-payment by April 15th, because January was when they stopped paying you, so 3 months out would be April 15th. If you're the second-tier sub, the 3-month notice also goes out same time on April 15th, but you need to make sure that you're sending your second month's notice by March 15th. And you can combine the March 15th notice with the April 15th notice. The key here is that you've got to make sure that that second month's notice was also sworn to, and that you've got to send that not only to the prime contractor, but also the surety. So if you want to combine them all into one notice and send it by the second month deadline, you can do that, or you can send it out twice. So third level down is the second Tier subcontractor with a potential retainage claim. So, your 3-month notice of non-payment still goes out by April 15th. Your second month notice still has to go out by March 15th. But your notice to the prime contractor about the retainage has to go out by January 15th, because it has to go out by the 15th day of the second month after the first time that you delivered those materials. So because you first worked in November, then you've got to send your notice out of your retainage by January 15th. And like I said before, it's best to try to send this stuff right away. You don't have to wait. So your notice of retainage could go out early. And then the other key here is, before filing a lawsuit to collect your retainage, you've got to send a 90-day notice. And that 90-day notice has to be sent within 90 days of final completion on the project. So the last area there is for a second tier of specially fabricated materials. Again, the 3-month notice still goes out by 4/15. Your second month's notice needs to go out by March 15th. But here's the big key. The notice to your prime contractor about entering into a contract with specially manufactured materials needs to go out by the 15th day of the second month after signing the contract. So that would put it on December 15th if you sign the contract on October 15th. So what do you need to put? The content of the notice and the amount of the notice. So in your 3-month notice, we touched on this earlier, you have to make sure that that 3-month notice is a sworn statement of your accounts, that you describe the labor and materials that's subject to the bond claim. The 2-month notice, this can be a little less formal. It doesn't have to be sworn to. You can include a copy of the invoice or statement that you sent to the contractor. You can include a copy of your contract, but ultimately you're just needing to let them know exactly what is missing, who you performed the labor for, the dates of labor, when it was performed. And that's really a key, and that's something we see that folks stumble up on a lot when they're filing their liens or their bonds in Texas, is that they don't specify the dates that the labor was performed. And I think a lot of times they don't do it is because they waited to the end of the project and said, I didn't get paid for the last 6 months, so it's going to be $100,000 for work done in the last 2 months of the project, so they don't miss their lien deadlines and their notice deadlines. But that's not going to work. So you have to break it out by month, every single month. So if you performed work in January, February, March, and April, and you didn't get paid certain amounts in those months, you've got to set that all out in your notices. Your early notice of retainage, you've got to let them know the date you entered into your subcontract. Indicate that the contract requires retainage and the nature of the retainage. And then the notice of the specially manufactured material, just the date that you entered into that subcontract, and that the material can't be used in any other project. So here's a copy of what you need to include for the notice. And the key language here is the total amount claimed by this notice is blank, which amounts to, so if the non-payment was, for $50,000 that you are owed, and then say which amount is just and correct, and all just and lawful offsets, payments, and credits known to claimant have been allowed. So you have to include that language. You must give a notice for every single month that you're not getting paid. The amount of claim should be broken down on the basis of when work is performed or material is delivered. And that's what you see right in the middle of the screen there. It says the materials and labor were furnished during the months or years as followed. And you've got to list every single month that the labor and material was performed and the amount that was unpaid for each of those months. So for lump sum and unit price contracts, it's a little bit different what you need to do. On the lump sum notice, you need to describe the labor and material in a manner that is reasonably identifies the labor and material. The labor was performed or the material was delivered to. State the approximate date of performance or delivery. State whether the contract was oral or written, and state the amount of contract, and also state the amount that you're claiming in your claim on the bond. So if it's a unit price contract, your notice must include attachment of statement of the account that lists the units and unit prices set by the contract, and a statement of completed or partially completed units. So what happens if you timely do everything that you need to do? What's going to happen? What's the burden on the surety? Well, here's what we call the 30-day dance, and it might never stop. So sureties are a form of insurance, and if you guys have ever worked with insurance companies, the name of the game is pushing back, asking for more information, and never kind of getting to the end of things. You know, always pushing back and saying, well, I need this. Well, this isn't quite right. Well, I need this. So that kind of happens a little bit with the surety stuff, and so we'll walk through this a little bit here. So the surety has to do the following things. They have to acknowledge and begin investigating the bond claim and request information from you within 15 days after they receive the claim. They have to give notice of either accepting or rejecting that claim within 30 days after completing their investigation. Well, when did they complete their investigation? That's open for interpretation. So that's where things usually get stalled out. If the surety needs additional time to investigate, they have to give you notice stating the reasons that they need additional time. They need to request additional information within 30 days after receiving insufficient material, and that could be open to interpretation. If additional time is required, they've got to give you notice of acceptance or rejection of the claim within 30 days after receiving sufficient investigation material from you. So if they're accepting all or part of the claim, they have to pay you within 15 days. If they're rejecting all or part of the claim, they've got to give you specific reasons for the rejection within 30 days after completing their investigation. So there are some burdens there. These fall in the Texas Insurance Code. They're not in the Texas Government Code because the sureties are regulated as insurance companies are in Texas. Now, one thing to remember that's kind of a bummer on Texas bonded projects is if the surety doesn't do what they're supposed to do, you cannot sue them. If they don't meet any of these deadlines, there's no bad faith. You can sue them. I apologize. You just can't sue them for bad faith. And bad faith is usually the big stick that gets insurance companies to comply with their deadlines. But that's not available when you're dealing with either a bonded private project in Texas or a state project in Texas. Under the Miller Act, it's available, I believe. We'll cover it in just a second. I'm fairly certain it's available. So here's your deadlines. If the surety refuses to pay the bond, you've got to sue the prime contractor and the surety within 1 year after you sent your notice of claim to the contractor and surety. And you can see how this could kind of get drug out. If they go back and forth, say they need more stuff, you might lose sight of this deadline. So make sure that you calendar whenever you send your notice of claim on a bonded project, calendar, 11 months where you should be thinking about filing your lawsuit, and definitely the deadline for filing your lawsuit is 1 year. So here's the kicker though, is you can't run to the courthouse early you've got to wait till at least 61 days after you filed your notice of claim. So that really ends up putting you in a 10-month window. So that's a short deadline. So what about the prime contractor? If the prime contractor doesn't get paid on Texas public projects, what can the prime contractor do? Well, there is hope. It's just not as good of a remedy. So the Texas Government Dispute Resolution Act, that's what GDRA stands for. That's where the prime contractor can bring its claims against the state entity. So the deadlines that you want to watch on this is you need to send written notice to the governmental entity within 180 days when you think they breached. So if non-payment is the breach that you're looking at, you've got 180 days. So you got a little more time. And then if you guys fail to agree, then you've got 120 days from the day you sent them the notice of their breach to go to the next step and request a hearing. After that, the process gets pretty involved, and you've got to really watch all of those timing and deadlines. And at that point, I know you'd have an attorney involved to make sure you're meeting all those deadlines. So here's the unfortunate part. It seems like there's always, I'm always bringing bad news, but if your claim is for less than $250,000 against the public institution, then you have a better chance of getting that resolved, because that's something that this agency can resolve on their own. If the claim is more than $250,000, which I see often on these projects when they go south, then you basically have to get the legislature to approve an appropriation to get more money to pay you. So in Texas, the legislature only meets every 2 years and only for 6 months. So good luck getting that approved. Not very likely. So anyway, other bad news. Hate to be a Debbie Downer on a Friday afternoon, but you only get actual damages. No attorney's fees are recoverable. You cannot recover consequential damages. You can't recover exemplary damages. And you can't recover unjust enrichment. So what is unjust enrichment? That's if you put $100,000 into the project because of change orders. Maybe your contract was only for $75,000, but then they asked for a change order and they didn't approve the change order. That you ended up putting an additional $25,000 into the project, and so they've got $100,000 worth of betterment to their project. You can't recover, for making them better, but you can recover if that $25,000 was out of your pocket. So it just depends on kind of how you characterize your damages. And consequential damages, sometimes that takes into account lost profits. So if you anticipated actually getting 20% profit on the job, you might not be able to recover that. You probably won't be able to recover it. So private projects. So the state doesn't own the property, so it's a private project. But to make sure that everyone's getting paid and everyone's doing what they need to do on the project, sometimes owners will require bonds on the project. So the bond has to be in the amount of the prime contract and written in favor of the private property owner. And then if that's the case and the claimant is not supposed to be able to file a lien on the owner's property, he can't tie up the owner's property because the bond is kind of protecting it. You still can file the lien, it's just the bond is there to protect against it. This relieves the owner of the obligation to withhold any retainage. So sometimes owners like that because in Texas it's mandatory that they withhold 10% retainage on all projects. And then as the claimant, As the contractor, you don't have to worry about trapping the funds in the hand of the owner because there's already a bond in place for the entire amount of the original contract on that project. So a perfected private project bond should be paid by the surety. And so this is nice to give contractors and subcontractors relief that they're actually going to get paid on a project. So how do you perfect project bond claim? You can do it in two ways, and it's best to do both of them. The first way is to satisfy the requirements of the lien. So if you do everything that you were supposed to do in terms of notice and filing your affidavit, your lien affidavit, you will perfect against that private bond. You can also, and this is what we're suggesting that you do, so you do the notice just like you need to do for a lien, but you also do the notice just like you're supposed to do for the bond, in a bond on a public project. So perfect by giving the surety the same notices that you would for the lien claim or the bond claim. So when do you get to sue on private payment bonds? Suit must be brought. You have to bring it in the county where the project is located, and you have a very short deadline for doing this. It's got to be 60 days after you perfect your private payment bond. So once 60 days has passed, you have to sue on the bond within 1 year of perfection. If the bond was recorded before your lien was recorded, but if the bond wasn't recorded before your lien was recorded, then you have to file suit on the bond within 2 years. When does that happen? When a general contractor ends up filing a bond after you filed the lien to remove the bond to remove the lien off of the property so that the property isn't encumbered for the owner. So here we are to federal projects, and this is actually much easier, much less complicated. The unfortunate part, though, is that federal projects only protect first and second tier subs and first tier materialmen. Anyone further down the chain, you have no rights on federally bonded projects, unfortunately. So what do you need to do? Second tier to subs are the only ones that are required to give notices all the way upstream. And the notice must be given to the prime contractor within 90 days of your last work on the site. And your last work on the site doesn't include warranty work, so just remember that. And the notice must include the amount claimed, the name of the party to whom the labor or materials were provided. Time limit. So this lawsuit on a federal project, you've got to wait at least 90 days until after your last work was complete, but you can't wait any longer than 1 year after your last work was complete. So you've got, a shorter window there. Warranty, like I said before, warranty repair work will not extend the date of final completion. And you have to file the lawsuit in the United States District Court where the contract was performed. Damages. This is the good part, right? Unfortunately, attorney's fees are not recoverable unless the surety acts in bad faith. So when I was kind of saying they are, but they aren't, this is where if you can show that the surety acted in bad faith, the surety didn't do what it was supposed to do according to its timelines, then you can recover your attorney's fees. And then also your attorney's fees can be recovered from the prime contractor. So even if you don't have a good claim against that bond, you can go after the prime contractor for your attorney's fees. And that wraps up my presentation for the bonded projects, and I'm going to turn it to Ariella.
Well, you did another fabulous job, and we're going to go over the online system where you can actually submit your requests through the SunRay application. So as it says, it's very easy. Easily send your notices online in the SunRay system, and you will not lose your bond claim rights. As we'll see in the next slide, you can create these very simply by just going create request, and you could see on the screen ahead of you that it just is some very simple information. It takes about 2 minutes to enter into the SunRay system, or 60 seconds as it says here, but no more than 2 minutes, and you can send a request and we can have that sent by certified mail for you to the appropriate parties. And on the next screen, you can also add a reminder. So as Danielle was explaining, sometimes there's not just one notice that needs to be sent. There's multiple notices that need to be sent, and you can make sure you keep track of your bond claim rights by adding reminders, which can be saved to your Outlook or your Google account, as well as an email reminder that's sent from the SunRay system. And then the next slide. You can also do all of your releases, your waivers, for free in the SunRay system. So instead of having to pull up a Word document and worry about putting in the legal description, it's a very, very, very simple process. All of the information is saved into the SunRay application. It takes no more than 60 seconds. You print it out and you send it over to your general contractor, subcontractor, or whoever is requesting it. And on the next slide. At this point, if there are any questions for Danielle, feel free to enter them into the box on the right-hand side. And we'll wait a few minutes. If you're nervous, you don't have to ask that question. You can always send us an email. As you could see on the screen now, you could send it to Danielle. It's dmaya, cotneycl.com. Or, of course, you could send one to me at ariella@sunraynotice.com. Let me see if we have any questions. Looks like you answered everything that could possibly be asked. So, but if not, we have, again, you could send us an email. Danielle, you did an absolutely sensational job. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ariella. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And we wish everyone a sunny day. Thank you again.